All right. We should be live now. I'm not sure if we are or not.
It says we are. We've been alive for 10 seconds.
Oh yeah, okay. There we go. Yeah, we are live. I cannot believe it. This has succeeded. All right. Hello. This is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And this today is finally episode 1 after an abortive previous attempt. Episode 1 of the RPG Pundit encounter. And today, this show is going to be essentially every 4 weeks. We will be having somebody who might be kind of a big celebrity of the OSR or a small celebrity of the RPG field in general, or it might be somebody up and coming that I've found out about, somebody who has a small press or a YouTube and that I want to promote. And I will be asking them questions and they will hopefully be providing me with the answers. And at the same time, of course, those of you in the audience will be able to also chime in and ask questions and make comments. So today, for episode 1, the original episode 1 was going to have Alexander Macris. He is unfortunately not available on this date, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to get him either for episode 2 or if not, one of the later episodes. He's still very interested in going ahead with that. And instead today we managed to get another person who is quite a celebrity in the in the kind of smaller realm of, let's say, old school gaming, I think, more than anything else. But it's very funny because when I announced who I was going to have on the show, there were several people who said, "Wait, that guy's not real, right?" And I'm like, "Wait, what do you mean he's not real?" And they're like, "No, it's a character from that thing about stuff Mr. Welch can't do in RPGs, right? That list. Right? He's a made up person, right?" And I'm like, "No, he's real. He's a real person." Okay, and to prove it, tonight we have Mr. Welch. Thank you for coming, and I hope that you're not going to regret it after dealing with my audience.
Well, deal convar. Yes, I am real. I am everybody's favorite green-eyed left-handed Welsh-speaking Texan, and I wrote the list almost 20 years ago.
Not real.
That's right. So, in fact, to me, it's very secondary that list. I know it, of course. I mean, like you said, it's been around for 20 years now. But the thing that to me you're most famous for, though I'm probably in the minority compared to the rest of the audience, or probably even this audience, is that your writings and videos on Mystara, which is my favorite canonical D&D setting, and I'm guessing it's probably that for you too. And you're one of a small group of people who are like heavy duty experts on that setting. So in the light of that and the fact that you've been doing this for quite a while, my first question to you is, who in the hobby has been good to you and who in the hobby has been bad to you?
Well, Frank Mincer, always a pleasure. He helped me with when I was writing the Mystara Player's Guide. He walked over and asked me to take a look at my book without introducing himself, and he grabbed it and he said, "Okay, you need to fix this, and this." And it's like, I'm like, just without asking and just doing all that. And then he hands me the book. It's like, "Well, thank you for that unsolicited bit of advice. And you are Frank Mincer. Oh, could you please repeat everything you just said verbatim while I write it down?" No, I actually haven't had many people that were like I had a beef with in the industry. Like I've always been, like I said, like I mentioned to you previously, I've always been on the periphery. So when I worked at Reaper, Ed Pugh would come in and he would go on his long-winded, "This is how you make a game." It's like, okay, and take notes. There's a few small presses that didn't pay me fully, but they're dead and gone, so nobody cares about them.
No
Like,
point naming them then.
Yeah, it's like I wrote the Complete Paladin back when there was the 3.0 glut for this local company, which was 3 guys in a garage, and they edited. They cut me a check and then edited out just about everything I wrote for them. So, but nobody knows them. And if you ever find the Complete Paladin, it'll be $1 at the used bookstore.
TSR and WotC used to do a lot. Both of them do that quite often too. As lots of other places too. It's one of the problems of being a kind of freelance writer or something like that. You're better off getting into your own publishing. Speaking of which, you mentioned the Mystara Player's Guide, right?
Yes.
And could you explain, because I'm guessing not everybody in this audience, which has now like 40 people in it, are going to be familiar, in fact, with Mystara or with that product.
Okay.
So normally I'd be the one explaining Mystara to them, but I think that you've got better expertise than I do. So go right ahead.
Essentially, Mystara was the setting that they introduced for the BECMI. It was originally introduced. It was Lawrence Schick and Aaron Alston, and that was their world. Though their version and the version that TSR printed were different enough to be that they're separate. Then they introduced the setting was they put the setting in Isle of Dread and just the maps, and they didn't tell you anything about it. And then when they needed a setting for the basic expert companion, somebody said, like, hey, we've got Lawrence and Aaron's stuff over here. And it's like, let's expand this out. And then the TSR people, in a feat of journalistic or creative, tornado, decided to release a 64 or 96 page book. Originally 64, then they expanded to 96 when the line editor said you can't make these books at 64, and decided basically to release one a month. So rather, or like Greyhawk got a box set, Forgotten Realms got a box set, Mystara had a highly detailed world book for every nation, released one after another.
That's right.
And the strength behind Mystara is they're all real world parallels, mostly. The first
there are
book,
a couple of sort of exceptions, right? Like
Karamikos is 14th century Serbia. Then you had Yularim, which was Arabia. Then Galantry, which is complicated because it's fantasy Yugoslavia. Not like everybody's a Slav, is in take 10 fantasy cultures, shove them into one nation. They all hate each other. And the only people they hate more than each other is everyone else. And you have to be a wizard or you're scum. And then you had Polynesians, Vikings, the Swiss. So it was its own little highly detailed world. Well, where it excelled was BECMI was translated into 17 different languages, where the original first and second edition D&D was translated into maybe 3. So if you wanted to play D&D abroad, if you wanted to play in Japan, the only Japanese version was Basic Expert Companion. So that's where we got Record of the Lotus Wars. That's Italy was, and then they produced it in Italy, and the Italians just ran with it. If you think, I'm big into Mystara, or Havard was one of the other big ones, are big into it. I think Italy has its own Ministry of Mystara. So when 5th edition came around, like 10 years ago, they said that they were going to open up the DM's Guild to everything, all of the old stuff. And so what we did, so it's like, all you got to, so we're, as soon as we write it up, so I started typing, I started working on this, and this book took me 5 years. And I just started converting, mainly to see if I could test myself and do it. Converting all the old Mystara into current day, because if you want to keep a setting fresh, you have to keep it updated. Or at least
is converting it to 5th edition, is that right?
Yeah, the 5th edition rules, mainly as a test to myself, but also to so new players would like, oh, there's this 5th edition. It's like, oh, there's a new one. That's where I ran into some issues. Art is expensive. and I never half-ass anything, which is a that's some people say it's a personality flaw. I just say it's a symptom of my obsession with flawlessness. So they released Curse of Straw, and they said, now you can do Ravenloft, and then you can do Eberron. It's like, and then they released Ghosts of Saltmarsh and Greyhawk Grognard. It's like, I get to make mine. It's like, and no Greyhawk for you. It's like, so hey, what about Mystara? What? And so after about 5 years, and then the second Ravenloft book came out, said, you know what? They're never going to touch Mystara, because they turned Ravenloft into basically corporate pablum. So I released it. And
well, that was the blessing, right? Was that Wizards of the Coast devastated every setting they touched, and now the one that was safe was Mystara. Somehow we were spared, you know.
Oh, somebody's asking me when I'm going to buy the rights to Mystara. First off, Hasbro never sells intellectual property; they license it. So
that's
can't
right.
buy it. If they wanted to license it, yeah, I'd see how much they want for a license. It can't be much, because that would mean they would have to admit Mystara exists. They don't like the real world parallels. So
thank you, Kyle, for the $10 super chat, by the way.
And then so I released it. I got all the art. I released it under the fan creation license, and I put it out. And I put it over on a RPG MP3, which was like one of the OG live streams, way before Critical Role. Mm-hmm. And just said, hey, if you guys want to donate, thanks. And I made it so you could do it on you could publish it yourself using Lulu, because I'm not allowed to make a dime. It's fan creation license. I can't put it up on the guilds because I don't have the license. They don't let Mystara up on the guilds.
Yeah.
So, and then everybody said, hey, we love it. So we're going to, so they downloaded the cover, which the only reason why you download the cover is to print out the book. And they did that, I think, 35,000 times. So there's 35,000 copies of the Mystara Player's Guide in print. And then the Italians got involved, and one of them said, "It's like, hey, I found a few problems. I found one problem with your book. Can I fix it for you?" He's like, "Yeah, sure. Just send me the file." Okay. Then he sends me back an entire translation in Italian. And he goes, "Now it's perfect." So we translated. So we put up the Italian one. So there's probably about 45,000 copies of it. And yeah, I got my money back and then some from people sending me stuff saying thank you. But Mystara did 40,000 copies of people having to go to another site, publish it themselves, and print it out and get it sent back. And yeah, I've seen cons, mostly Italian, where they like everybody's showcasing off their book.
So regarding Mystara, though, how well do you think Mystara works with the 5th edition rules?
I didn't have much of a problem with it. I had to, depending on it, because Mystara had some really weird rules.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, right? I think that most game worlds are roughly, you can if you're looking at the world devoid of the any kind of mechanics, you can put it into any number of systems. But there are some worlds that are going to be oriented more closely to the particular system or edition that they were made for, right? Like, to certain degrees, Greyhawk plays better with like old D&D than anything else, right? The Forgotten Realms was at its peak in 2nd edition, and I think that's a connected fact, right? It did kind of okay in the 3rd. But then there are some where this element of setting creation becomes more intense in particular. And I think Mystara is one of them. And the reason for that is that it was created as the world for the basic expert companion, etc. rules, later the rule cyclopedia. And those rules have certain elements to them that inform the unspoken world, right? And that's actually kind of how it started, right? Because it started first with the rules, and then the known world map, and then it kind of grew out of that.
Yeah.
But it was always about being able to highlight those particular rules. So those have some very particular rules. There's no half races. There's no multi-classing, right?
Oh.
There's racist class. All of these sort of things became part of the fabric of Mystara as a setting, right? So you have these like places where, you know, the Mexican orcs. Mystara had Mexican orcs decades before the new D&D edition, right?
The Mexican orcs with a strangely German name.
That's right. And then all these other elements to it that are, you know, the immortals instead of like gods, you know, and all of that. I think it was made for BECMI and Rule Encyclopedia. That's why when it was forced to switch to AD&D second edition, part of it was maybe the products, but really if you look at those box sets from second edition, they weren't particularly bad, right? Some of them were really good actually, but they just didn't quite gel with the different reality of the second edition rules. I kind of figured this out in the process of becoming a game designer, and where it really hit home for me was with Dungeon Crawl Classics. I started about 11 and a half years ago, a Dungeon Crawl Classics campaign that is still going on today. And it was the basis for the creation of my Gonzo fantasy setting, World of the Last Sun. And the whole premise of that campaign was to make a world that would actually fit what the Dungeon Crawl Classics rules works like, you know. So the crazy elements of fumbles and criticals, the random titles that you get as you level up, the feat, you know, the great feats warriors can make, the and especially the magic system, right? The unpredictable arcane magic, but also the completely arbitrary clerical magic, right? This is a world where you have a cleric. He can be doing everything right morally, right? He can be doing everything according to his alignment or to what his god is supposed to like. But if he rolls too low when he's casting the spell, God punishes him, right? And so that I was saying, what world is that where that could happen? Well, it's got to be a world where God is completely arbitrary or unhinged, right? So what if God is this machine, right? It's not really a god, it's a supercomputer. And the clerics are like tapping into it, and except it's flawed because it was damaged in some terrible apocalypse. So half of the time it gives you the wrong result. You know, it punishes you instead of giving you the spell you're supposed to do, right? And so that was the beginning of the premise of the World of the Last Sun. And this is and looking retroactively from there, I can see how worlds that were specifically created in certain settings, in certain systems, are going to always have these particularities. That means that they'll never be quite as good if you do them with another system. I think Mystara is a stronger case for that than most of the D&D settings.
Well, the way I approached it was I invoked one of my own sayings is the most important word in D&D or in any game setting is no. So I started putting restrictions. Okay, so yes, elves are the ones that can be fighter magic users. Okay, so the Eldritch Knight class is restricted to elf. It is, in 5th edition, that's not normally allowed. You say, oh, you can be anything or anything. It's like, okay, well, they don't allow that. The half races was easy enough. Actually, we just did put in a chart. It's like, hey, if your mother's an elf and your father is a human, whichever one's the same sex as you, that's what race you are.
Yeah.
And we actually turned half elves into their own race, which through the Red Steel setting, where the curse, any human that had elven blood became this new race. And it actually worked out surprisingly better than we thought. I had to tweak a few things because there's a few things from Mystara that didn't work in Beckme very well, and they didn't work in any other setting whatsoever. Secret Crafts of Glantry, I'm looking at you. Runic magic, that was a pain. But then with all the real world parallels in the subclass system, we were able to add specific, like you want Centurion, you want Phaeacian Centurions, you want Clantier Galaglass.
Yeah, there's so much you can do there. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
And then I started approaching people to, like from other cultures, because Wizards is like, you can't, you don't want to do this. And it's like, Mystaria is probably the best known setting outside the US. So it was like, I started asking, it's like, okay, so
in the US, it's one of the least known settings,
Yeah.
It's very,
but it's, because of all the translations. And so I'm like, I have a friend of mine who happens to be married to a Maori from New Zealand. And it's like, Jack, can you help me out? It's like, if we were going to do, like a subclass for a Maori warrior, what do we do? It's like, well, first off, don't make us berserkers. It's like, we're warriors, we're not barbarians. It's like, okay. It's like, and then we started working on this, and it's like, we need to do like the, like the hacker war cry, and it's like, give us a bonus. It's like, all right, do this, type. And it's like, yeah, it's great. And it's like, so the artist sends back, the artist sends me back the art. It was this woman who was at Brock Sampson naked. She was not sexy. She was there to move like an animal, to like feed on their fear, because it enhances the feel of the kill. And people were upset because she had the wrong tattoos on her face.
Oh. And
he's like, and he sends me back. He's like, yeah, all my family thinks she's great, so keep her. And I'm larger than you, So, and then it's like, so he translated all of the words into Maori, and he sent me back all the translations. He goes, all right, here's all the subtitles you needed, and it's like, okay,
so that could be like the only case of a Maori translation of a D&D product, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't think that would be too common.
A few words here, a few words there. It's like, yeah, so for the doubles, the Maori word for double strike means this. It's like, okay, typing those. At the end of it, I'm looking at all the stuff that he handed. Like, none of these words mean penis, right? Probably not.
Probably not. So actually, when you're talking about there, makes me think of one of the reasons why I love Mystaria so much, which is that it was an enormous area of experimentation. Maybe because it was, very much. It was never the top setting in America, which is all that counted, right? And to TSR. So people could be way more experimental with it in the 80s and the early 90s. And so you have in all of the gazetteers, all of these weird rules, weird races, classes, and types of magic, and all kinds of things that it was. You can tell it's just someone saying, well, how do we do that? Okay, let's just try it like this, right, and see how it goes. And some of them were awful, as you said, but then some of them were really remarkable, and it was just an area where you could literally see in print, because they would just go and do it, right? Because there was very little pressure about whether it was going to be a functioning mechanic or not. Yeah. They were saying, well, this is what we're going to try, right? It was almost like a magazine article, but it wasn't. It was actually part of the setting.
They threw everything against the wall.
The variety is enormous.
Yeah. They threw everything against the wall to see what stuck, and some stuff worked, some stuff didn't. The creature crucibles had some of the best some of the best fantasy races that you could play. The only problem was it also had some of the most unplayable fantasy races. And like the rules for playing lycanthropes, the fourth book, Night Howlers, the rules for playing lycanthropes were so complicated that the DMs said, no, we're not going to do this, because I don't want to have to keep track of 3 different types of experience points. The undersea races were useless above water. They included
which was like, it was a bold choice, right? It was that actually probably should make sense, right? They were looking at it from a point of view of realism, I guess. But
yeah, it's like, I'm going to be a Kopru, which is like a cross between a mind flayer and a walrus. And it's like, what's your move speed on land? 5.
Yeah,
that might be a problem, sir. And half of you guys can't breathe air, can you? Nope. Okay. And then you ended up with then they started doing the silly stuff with what was it? Things like this. You can play a Sphinx, or you can play a Nagpa. Back when the Nagpa were not part of the Raven Queen and her Goth Dami Mommy, but then you had to get like 1.2 million experience points to get to 2nd level. So it's like, yeah, it's a great idea. It's like, yeah, but nobody's going to play this. So then you had Tall Tales of the Wee Folk, and that one was the good one. That one was the one that gave us all the cool fairy creatures. But then you started looking at where the leprechaun had 1d2 hit points for first level, and then he gets to second level and he gets 2d4 hit points.
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
He doesn't get a lot more after that. It's like, okay, how are you supposed to keep these guys alive?
Well, that's part of the game too, though, right? Like, I mean, that's one of the things I liked about BCMI is that it had a pretty good level of lethality until the moment that somebody got raised dead, and then after that, it had no lethality at all. That was the downside of that part of the mechanic. But
the problem
you got a good run until somebody gets that spell.
Yeah. The problem with the Fey races is if you were one of the tiny ones, you know, like wizards could live longer than you because you know you had 2 hit points tops.
Yeah. Well, I knew a few wizards that only had 2 hit points too. You know?
Yeah,
one.
But they had the option to get more. The brownie starts with 1d2.
Yeah, yeah. So let me take a look here at just 1 second here, because okay. So I wanted to ask you a few other questions. We can go back to Mystara in a moment.
Absolutely.
But my second important question to you was because I'm going to presume here that Mystara is your favorite setting. Yeah. So what's your second favorite RPG setting?
Ooh, D&D or otherwise?
Your choice.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be vampire if you like, but I'll be disappointed. But you know, whatever.
No, I was a mage player. Let me see. What do I got? Oh, it's probably Star Wars D6.
Star Wars D6. All right.
Yeah.
So
that was I had.
So you are also a
Star Wars D6.
You are also a sci-fi fan.
Yeah. I have played.
I mean, there was elements of sci-fi in some bits of Mystara too, weren't there?
Yeah. Oh no, I've played. I mean, just from the list, I've played. There's probably 80 games on there that I've played. Some good, some bad. You know, 7th Sea, though the second edition was absolutely garbage. Hey, let's make a game where nobody can fail.
Yeah.
We played Rogue Trader, Twilight 2000. That one was depressing. Teenagers from Outer Space. We had a glorious, fun campaign playing Street Fighter as a comedy. Granted, I just finished a glorious, fun campaign where we were playing G.I. Joe as a comedy. Had a bunch of GURPS for a while back when I was in my math phase. That was a mistake. Might have also been dating somebody from Steve Jackson at the time. That was a mistake.
So you just mentioned the list. So I guess we should talk about this too, right? There is. I don't know if everybody here knows it. I'm sure that a lot of the older people will, because this was quite famous for a while, and like you said, in the early 2000s, which I think was initially 100 things, right? It started with 100.
25.
Sorry, how many? 35. Okay. Things that Mr. Welch can no longer do in an RPG, right? And
Deborah,
now there's like 3,000 of them, right? Is that
2,625.
Okay. So how did that get started? Like, what was it? Was it you that started this, or was it somebody else who impulsed you to start this?
It was my 7th Sea game master, Deborah, who was like joking about all the things that I had been told to stop doing in 7th Sea, because we were exploiting rules, and just for fun, because it's like when it wasn't our turn, I would like, okay, let's see what we can do in these rules. Like it says, you don't take any damage from any items weighing 50 pounds or less if dropped from less than 100 feet. So it's like, okay. Glenn, what are you doing? It's like, me and Scott are catching cannonballs with our teeth as I'm dropping them off of a 4-story building. She's like, you can't do that. So the rules says we can. So she said, well, could you ever write down everything you've ever been told to do? And it's like, no. I was like, well, I did, just come up, write down stuff. And then so I wrote some stuff down, put it on LiveJournal. And the first one was we were playing a Hackmaster. And I built a character. If you ever look at the EverQuest role-playing game, their bard looks like she's about to go into Master of Puppets. Like, that's my character. And then I'm like, well, how do I want? Like, what do I want to base this character off of? Like, oh yeah, Moon the Loon. So I was playing a bard based on Keith Moon, And
Okay.
after about two sessions, the game master was very tired of finding the party's chariot upside down in the pond, or
So did he kill you with a drug overdose? Is that the answer?
No, he killed her with a portal of annihilation.
Okay.
He did play the drum solo of life.
Yes, well, that was I wouldn't do some sort of like. I was playing a gnome bard from hell because I was in 3rd edition. I was trying to build a character that was absolutely useless. And if you put the wrong stats and the wrong abilities, you could play somebody that had no.
Absolutely. Third edition is set up that way, right? It's set up so that if you don't know what you're doing, you'll have an enormously less capable character than somebody who really knows what they're doing, which is the real problem with 3rd edition, in my opinion. But
so you take a gnome bard, you give him a 9 charisma, you put no points in perform because he plays by ear. You give him a 1-man band, and you take all your character points and put it into 1-point job skills that represent everything you've ever been fired from. Yeah. And then you follow the party around and leech 1/6 of their experience points.
That's genius. So, what was it like? How quickly did this list take off? Right? Like, where was it first posted? Because I don't remember. I mean, I was there, but I don't remember anymore.
It was posted on my LiveJournal channel. It's still up. It's still in the exact same spot that it started.
LiveJournal still exists?
Yes, and I think I'm the only reason why it exists. It's all all in Russian now.
I couldn't save Zanga. You know, when my first moment of fame in the internet was when I started my RPG Pundit blog, and that blog was originally Zanga.com. Which for those of you who are newer to the internet, you won't know it. It doesn't exist anymore. It blew up overnight, did it? Like, was it?
It blew up right around 100 when people started reminding me of all the things that I.
Maybe that's why that's what I thought it was originally. Right?
Yeah,
that's probably when I first saw it.
When it hit 100, they took it and they published it in Knights of the Dinner Table.
Oh, okay.
And so that's when it exploded.
Did you get any money for that? For it being published in Knights of the Dinner? I see.
I don't think Knights of the Dinner Table, right around that time of the year, I don't think he got any money for it either.
Probably.
Because that was right after.
That was early on, yeah.
Yeah, that was when it was like, episode 30. Hadn't been going for a full year yet.
So all of these, okay, this is a tough question, right? You don't know. I might have been doing some investigative reporting here or something. You have now, you said how many? 3,000, is that?
2,625.
Okay, 2,625, right. And every single one of these are real things? Are they really
they were something that I suggested they got vetoed?
It's not something you just made up and decided to add it in because it sounded funny?
No. Every one of them has, and I have DMs that will vouch for me, or that were the ones that brought it to my attention.
All right.
Some of it,
you now have like people that you DM that you play with, like that the DMs of those games will kind of try to push you to add it, like something that maybe you don't want to have on the list or something. But
they will. I've had people invite me to games just to have me play clown. It's like, okay, you're at the table now. Say something funny. It doesn't work that way.
So it's a bit like Bart Simpson, right? Like, say the thing, Bart. Say the thing.
And it was like, that actually made it on the list one time where I got invited to this game, and I was like playing a serious character, and he kept trying to put me in comedic things, but we weren't playing a comedy game. And it's like, okay, that's not this isn't funny. It's like, like most of the stuff is me finding rules that don't work, or if I get bored and my character starts to do something weird. Or it's like I'll make a suggestion that's like, that is obviously going to get shot down. But yeah, and a lot of them is me taking a normal situation, but that kind of went sideways, where taking it out of context is funnier than if I explain the context.
I'm betting that right now a number of our viewers are busy Googling to find the list, because some of them I'm sure have not seen this before. Of course, a lot of the older guys, the grognards, are going to be well aware of it. but maybe they haven't seen it in a while,
Beforehand sometimes, and you do it a lot of the time to diffuse tension at the table.
Yeah, and the wife was pointing like a lot of the stuff is me me diffusing tension at the table, or I'll think of something to try out at the table to see how it works. If the DM doesn't like it, then it goes on the list. If the DM does like it, then everybody has fun. Yeah,
makes sense. So I'm gonna pause for a moment here to say to everyone, this is as you know, this is a live stream. It's not at the moment monetized. If any of you, I've always made my policy in live streams, because a lot of live streamers, what they do is you have to give a super chat for me to read your comment or for you to be able to ask a question. I don't do that. I'll highlight comments that I find amusing or interesting or worth talking about regardless. But if you want to support the channel, then please put in a super chat there. I'll also mention, just in case, because I forgot to at the beginning, Mr.Welch has a YouTube channel. I have linked it in the description of the video, so you can just, if you click the more button on the description, it'll be right at the top, right? And if none of you have seen it, he's got a lot of very good videos there. He's got stuff from his list. He also has a ton of Mystara stuff and some other things on there. I don't know if there's any other thing that you want to highlight about your channel apart from
right now. Yeah, well, I just put up I put up a new Mad Musings. My other PlayStation, or my other PlayStation. My other playlist is Mad Musings, where I review games. And that one was, I had to put up Zombie Road because that one is coming out. It's a Hungarian zombie game. Not bad for a minimalistic game, but I had to get it out before their Kickstarter, not Kickstarter, but whatever they were using that's similar to Kickstarter was done. But I've reviewed, I think I started off with the Street Fighter RPG, and the Zombie Road is my 94th reviewed RPG. And I would have reviewed a lot more, but there was a certain hurricane and some other stuff this summer that kind of derailed everything. And then I got Exalted next, which is going to be fun because it's the anime RPG that's not technically anime, and
which edition of Exalted? Which
I'll
edition?
I'll be talking about all of them, and about how the fact that each one of them causes the fan base to tear at each other like a pack of wild dogs.
When Exalted came out originally, I made this blog entry where I was talking about how basically Exalted was all of these vampire snobs, all the World of Darkness guys who had invested so much into claiming that D&D was a stupid game, and literally in the second edition World of Darkness book, it said, well, you shouldn't be mean to people who just play D&D, looking down at them from your ivory tower of your superior gaming style, right? And all this stuff. So they couldn't play. These are people that couldn't play D&D because it would ruin their reputation, right? So Exalted, they tried to pretend that it was this kind of sophisticated thing when really it's just their substitute for D&D, right? It's just this bash 'em up sort of thing where they get to do this stuff, but then still pretend that they're being snooty about it, right? It's like like one of these Showtime shows or something that tries to act pseudo-intellectual.
It's going to be hard making an anime video about an anime tabletop without using actually any anime. But I mean, my first exposure to anime was Legend of the Overfiend. So I kind of swore anime off.
You started hard there.
Yeah, I had a roommate that had a questionable taste in his animation entertainment. But then I discovered Yojimbo by Kurosawa, and I am much better.
So you are not just an RPG guy. You are generally interested in nerd stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I've got.
So I keep trying to look for someone like me because I famously, all of the people that are subscribers to me probably know this by now. I don't play video games. I don't watch anime. I don't collect comic books anymore. I did when I was a kid up to a teenager. And stopped around college, apart from a couple of graphic novels. And I'll watch science fiction movies and superhero movies. I don't read serial novels of like science fiction or fantasy stuff. In fact, I barely read novels at all anymore. And so like I'm just the RPG guy, you know, like, and I've never actually met somebody else, especially somebody who's got kind of like a social media presence that is the same way. Everybody else is just kind of a general nerd. But I think I'm going to ask everybody I interview this question. So, but RPGs are I guess your main fandom.
I got started long time ago. I mean, I was always good at writing, but my skills were always pulled away from the gaming industry into the if we give you money, will you write something for our magazine, or will you add something to our book? And okay. And
now, are these like always like kind of like gaming magazines and books, or are you talking about you worked in publishing of other stuff?
I have, since my full name is Henry Glenn Welch. Okay. And depending on which version of that name you see tells you exactly what I'm writing. So if it's like H.G. Welch, it was when I was writing history or working in the publishing. And then Mr. Welch is gaming, and Henry Welch was I was working for this one particular the city blog. And then Glenn Welch was just was a catch-all. So like I think the first thing I ever got published was an article about the wooden representations of Genghis Khan and what it meant. Paid
so
me $20.
Are you a historian? Like
yes, I am a historian.
Well, me too.
Yeah. I grew up on tales of like the Texas history because I'm a descendant of one of the people that fought at San Jacinto.
Okay.
He actually manned, Thomas Finney Plaster. He manned the Twin Sisters until he got drunk, and they kicked him out of the army the day after the battle. And then 2 days later, they found him at a bar and drug him back and re-enlisted him because he was trained artillerists were hard to find in 1836.
Yeah, I would bet at that point in time, in that place.
So my mother and father were big into genealogy because my mother was like, you're descended from Betsy Ross. It's like, oh, really? That's awesome. Oh, and
you're an American original.
Yeah, and it's like also we're related not directly to what was it? Geronimo. Really? Yeah, we're like he was like an uncle or something of our guy. Like, oh, really? Wow. So my father like looks up, like, well, who are we famously related to? And it's like a prison guard at Andersonville and John Wesley Hardin. Okay.
Well, I've got the same thing with my family in genealogy, but it's because we're European aristocrats, and I don't mean like somebody somewhere, like everybody says, oh, I had a great granduncle or something like that who was a duke or something. No, I mean like, title holders. And so, I know pretty much my patrilineal line of descent to like the 16th century,
Yeah, my father's using the genealogy. He's got us back to the Domesday Book, and we are no one of any importance.
Well, in America, that doesn't matter, right? Yeah. That's the nice thing about it.
So I have written, I think one of the highlights of my journalism career was getting subpoenaed. That was nice. For
what?
I was writing an article on the history of Houston's Rose at a particular neighborhood. And the article was pertinent to a lawsuit that happened to be ongoing between the city and a social group. And it's like somebody read the article, and the next thing I know, I'm getting a call saying, hey, we're going to send you a subpoena because we need all your notes because this is relevant to our case. Okay. I can just send you to the library where I got all the information. Well, yeah, but you've already sorted it.
Yeah, you did the work for them.
Yeah.
But you weren't required to name names or anything like that,
yes.
I guess.
Yeah, like, okay, here's everybody that was involved in it. They're all dead. They've been dead for decades. This road was built in, like 1907. and then so I did that. I did, and I wrote because Houston hates its history, so I was like researching all this stuff, and you know, and it ended up with finding out, you know, like little known people, and then they told me I had to start reviewing theater, which was
Hellish.
yeah, it was hellish, but it had some good theater and some bad theater. But if you've ever had to sit through Hamlet 17 times in 1 year, that scars a man.
I bet.
But yeah, I've written.
Sorry, no, carry on with what you're saying. Go ahead.
So no, I was a bit of a hack. I'd write whatever they did. I was working on a dark future RPG that had some fantastic mechanics, and this other game company says like, "Hey, we'd like to acquire your games." Like, okay, great. How much would you want? Like, I don't know, a few thousand. So they sent it to me. Then they could promptly go out of business. So that game never got published. That was fun. They probably.
Well, I got to say, I didn't. You know, I was not expecting that my history degree would end up mostly working for my making of RPGs, you know. But that's basically what it is, you know. And,
most people with history degrees, they spend most of their time waiting for another historian to die to get his job.
Yeah, well, I saw, you know, by the time I got into my master's, I looked at what academia was like, and I already realized before I finished that I wasn't going to go that way, you know. So I ended up doing other stuff. But the place where, you know, I thought, well, you know, a history degree gives you a lot in a lot of ways, but I figured I'd probably never end up writing history books. But essentially, like my name here is said, I read RPG Pundit's rule books and settings like they were novels, which is good. I appreciate that. But what they really are is like history books, right? Like I've had some of my players in my campaigns. You know, when I run a campaign, I've run a lot of historical campaigns, and a lot of them come out saying, well, you know, I probably know more about whatever the subject is, whether it's the War of the Roses or the Wild West, or, you know, the Silk Road than pretty much anybody. Like, that's a really nice thing to hear from that my games. I mean, I don't make them as educational games, right? But if you're playing it, you're going to end up knowing a whole bunch about the time and the place and the people, because I try to be historically authentic there.
You do your research.
So, yeah. So what was I going to say? Oh yeah, on that topic. How much are you involved in with the OSR? Because Mystara isn't OSR technically, because it's literal old school. But have you looked at a lot of OSR games?
I've been sent a fair bit, but I pretty much, if I'm playing Mystara and we're not doing it with the 5th edition, we play almost exclusively Rule Cyclopedia.
Mm-hmm.
I am biased because I have my Rule Cyclopedia when I went in to go geek on somebody, or to geek on Jeff Easley, he, instead of autographing it, he illustrated it with a dragon. So every time somebody wants to play Mystara in the old school, I got to show that off.
Yeah, for
sure. I've seen quite a few of them, but for the most part, we just play Rule Cyclopedia because all the rules are in one book.
It's interesting. There's a lot of, you know, there are kind of 3 waves of OSR design. The first wave were what you call the clone games, right, which are just basically remakes of the old rule books. And there's a ton, probably more than any other edition, there's a ton of clones of the basic expert rules. You know,
the BX.
BE especially, but sometimes they go into stuff from the companion or the master set. There isn't, as far as I know, any that is a clone of the Rules Cyclopedia itself, though, right? Which also had other stuff in it that was not in the box sets.
If there is, I don't know of it, but there might be.
Yeah, I don't think there is, which is just kind of curious, because to me, like, the Rules Cyclopedia is, as good as some of the other stuff is, right? Like the 1st edition Dungeon Master's Guide is magnificent and whatever, but But the Rule Cyclopedia is the single best D&D rule book that was ever done for official D&D anyway.
Yeah,
as far
hard
as
to
I'm
argue with
concerned.
that.
Yeah, but yeah, now what you have is a lot of second and third wave OSR games, which are either the second wave are basically rules that are not based on any edition of D&D, but are rather, you know, trying to take the D&D rules into other directions. And the third wave is creating genre-based rules or setting-based rules for specific places, right?
Yeah.
And I do see in those that there's a lot of places where you've got people that were clearly influenced by Mystara to different degrees. I mean, certainly my World of the Last Sun, it's not Mystara, but it's got a lot of Mystara in it, you know, like it's got a lot of that sort of stuff.
Hopefully not as many continuity errors.
Yeah. And Bruce Hurd has done stuff for the OSR now because they didn't let him continue with the Princess Arc stuff himself. So
I'm friends with Bruce. I have talked to Bruce when we had MystaraCon. I was on a panel with Bruce and he's and a few other. Yeah, me and the other guys just kind of just put our fists in our mouth and let Bruce talk for the whole 2 hours. They weren't there to see us.
We had him on inappropriate characters. He was a good guest.
Don't keep talking, Bruce. Keep talking. We're here. When they got a question for us, we'll answer it. Spoilers, they didn't have a question for us.
No. So obviously Mystara is your favorite setting. Yeah. So but the question is, what if you were to say what is it that you love about Mystara compared to, let's say, other D&D settings? What is it that how would you define that love?
Originally, it was because it was on sale at KB Toys and it was the cheapest one I could get. And when
so
you're 14
where
and you only have $20, that buys a lot of loyalty. For me, the reason why I liked it so much was because the gazetteers were so comprehensive. You have, so you crack open, Greyhawk. You've got 2-3 paragraphs on Keoland or the Yeomanry. You buy, you get Karamikos. You've got everything to know about the nation, its people, its history, its NPCs, Bargle.
The gazetteers were amazing. I ended up getting them all. So
you ended up with this entire world that was completely fleshed out, and you didn't have to wait for, it's like, okay, well, now here's the supplement for the Dalelands to tell you more about what we've already told you about.
Yeah, or the problem with second edition Forgotten Realms, where they would come out with the novel would change the realms in fundamental ways, and then they had to tell you this is how you have to change your campaign now. Yeah. Speaking of which, Quantifil has a question for you. Would you care to talk about the problems with Wrath of the Immortals?
The problems with Wrath of the Immortals are actually pretty simple. TSR was in its nuke phase, and every setting world had to burn. So what they wanted to do was they had written themselves into a corner because Alphatia was way too powerful, which was this magical empire of wizards, and they had like 1,036 level wizards that were in part of the Grand Council of Wizards. They could squash anybody, so they had to get rid of Alphatia, and they decided to kick the timeline forward. Well, they sink Alphatia. And there's nothing the party can do about it. It's a Morton's fork. You get to the machine. It's like, can you push the right buttons to save Alphatia from sinking into the ocean? The answer is no. There's 3 options, and they all end up with the island or with the continent tipping over and sinking into the ocean.
The meta plot required it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And then they also got Alfheim, where they're like, okay, everybody, we're going to go here. So the not the Dark Elves, they don't have Dark Elves, they have Shadow Elves.
The Shadow Elves, yeah.
So the Shadow Elves decide they're going to invade Alfheim. They show up, and then there's they make the tree sick. They drive out all the other elves, and then they live there. And the Candlebarth Forest gets sick and die. There's no player agency whatsoever. The players can't do anything about this. And for whatever reason, Alfheim is completely surrounded by a much more powerful nation in Darrican, who is not going to like the fact that there's all these invaders in their closest ally now. And you've also got godlike creatures with the archfey who were sitting there chilling out with the other elves who are now in a cursed blighted forest, and they just had all of their property values go down. And you have these really scary, you know, archfey that are going to have a word about, you know, it's like, hey, we had an HOA, dude. This is not cool. So the biggest problem with Wrath of the Immortals was it completely changed the timeline, and the players could do nothing about it in a module that presented them with, it's like, hey, you might be able to save it, but no, you can't. And it just so most people still, when I was putting together the player's guide, everybody said just keep it at the 1000 timeline. And actually, one of my most when I do alternate history for Mystara, one of my most popular by a huge margin was the 1005 timeline, where we don't sync Alphatia and we don't wreck Alfheim, and we keep the status quo, because what was one of the biggest parts of Mystara was there was this Cold War vibe, because you had these two empires that were super powerful, and if they attacked each other, they would destroy each other. And you get rid of Alphatia, and you get rid of the Cold War vibe. You get rid of what people liked.
Well, that was the problem with all of the second edition era, was that they did these sort of massive changes to all kinds of settings. They did it to Forgotten Realms, they did it to Dragonlands, they did it to Dark Sun like a year after they came out with Dark Sun, I think, now a couple of years. They did it to Ravenloft, and every single one, Greyhawk. Well, you know, actually Greyhawk from the Ashes kind of made it a slightly more interesting setting, I think. But in all the other cases, the changes made everything worse. You know, like it didn't actually make it a better setting. You know.
I know you like this setting, but what if we changed it and made it different? Well, then we wouldn't like it, would we? Yeah,
that is the problem. So I got another question for you here. Mr. Drew Ender says, Mr. Welch, I love your content. What are the biggest things D&D Fantasy Worlds have lost from not continuing Mystara? Also, the top 5 Mystara source books.
Biggest thing that D&D has lost from Mystara is, for one thing, all of the fresh takes. So it's not just everything is rehashed from the Forgotten Realms point of view, which was that started to become a problem in 3rd, and they hammered it home in 4th. Also, you got rid of a lot of, you know, the really well written books like Glantry or Tall Tales. And it's like people didn't get the you know, they lost track of really well done stuff because they just wanted to shoehorn it away. Top 5 Mystara books outside the player's handbook. I don't say that lightly, because I don't say that in jest, because it's the only place where you can get basic lore for all the nations in one book. Okay, so you'd have to have let me see, Champions of Mystara, the box set, which, yes, it was partially a rehash of the Princess Arc, but the character creation, the world building, and similar to that, it was amazing. Then you will want to get Tall Tales, because they're yes, hello puppy. The fairy rules were also amazing. Not Dawn of the Emperors. Dawn of the Emperors should have been 2. Glantry is really good. Darrican, though some people don't like it because of there's not a lot of conflict. But if you want, you know, information about how to tie a world together, like economically, nothing's better. And then probably the Karamikos, because Karamikos was 64 pages that established a world, and if it hadn't been successful, we wouldn't be talking about Mystara today. You know, you get one chance to make an impression, and they hit the home run.
Yeah, I mean, Karamikos was the perfect starting point in any Mystara campaign, right? It was the most kind of the bog standard fantasy setting, you could say, for Mystara, because everything else then becomes like these other kind of cultural settings, you know.
Yeah, and the weird thing was yes, it was the standard, but it wasn't a Western European setting. That was the big thing.
No, it wasn't Western European exactly. Yeah, I mean, it was closer to Eastern European. And I guess for me, because I'm a big fan of kind of the Gonzo end of fantasy gaming. I really liked, obviously, Hollow World.
Yes.
I loved all of the Princess Arc stuff, like starting with the articles in Dragon Magazine, but then the various box sets that covered all of those, like, because all of Mystara is like these weird kind of cultural locales, but then when you get into the Princess Arc stuff, it goes into like kind of wilder sides to that, so like all the Red Steel stuff and all of the coast and it's and the flying ships, like that's something in World of the Last Sun, it's you can tell the aspects of my favorite parts of Mystara, because the World of the Last Sun is a Dyson sphere, so it's literally the whole game is set inside the hollow world, so to say, and it has floating islands and it has sky ships and all of that stuff in it, so you can see where my preference is coming.
Yeah, when they no, it wasn't the Hollow World. When they asked they asked one of the guys that was in charge of 5th edition about Mystara, Bruce did on a stream, and the guy just completely blanked and said something about Red Steel. See, most people remember the Hollow World because it was just so gonzo, but it was not the best game design. Say, oh, you want to be a cleric? Do you have a wisdom of 16? No, no one does. So then you guys don't get a cleric in the party, do you?
Yeah. Well, but that was interesting in a way. That was also part of what, a lot of the sort of things that you can sometimes find in some of the more unusual third wave OSR products is that you look at the system and do weird stuff with it that changes the way the game plays, right? So if the ubiquity of clerics is definitely a feature that affects the gameplay. And if you suddenly have like a restriction on how much clericing you can have, right? And in the Hollow World, they reduced, the spell power of wizards and of clerics. That radically changes how the game plays, right? And of course, it makes it in some cases a harder mode, you could say, but that's really, for the 90s, that was really interesting variation on D&D. That nowadays you get a lot of that in OSR games, but back then this was like a radical difference. I thought it was fascinating when it came out. So let me see here. I'm just trying to catch up on the comments. Somebody suggesting that my authentic historical games should be converted to 5e. Well, that would be interesting, Mogapur. First edition DMG written in High Gygaxian is fantastic. Honestly, though, Baptism of Fire is just as good in a lot of ways. Thank you, my name. That's a big compliment.
I'm kind of split on Gygax. Tomb of Horrors, not my favorite.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing too, though. Like I was going to comment that I'm sure that there's probably quite a few of our viewers here who never played in Mystara, or at least they think they never played in Mystara. But there's, they've probably run some modules that are actually set in Mystara. Like Keep on the Borderlands, for example. And quite a few of these other ones are classic modules that are technically part of Mystara.
Yeah. I want to say...
Tomb of Horrors was not, however.
When I was growing up, everybody was obsessed with Tomb of Horrors. So one guy announced that he was going to have a special module and bring our best characters and see what happened. And I knew what he was going to do. So I got a copy of Tomb of Horrors and I memorized it. I memorized the correct path. And 15 minutes into the module, I had killed the Lich. He was not happy.
Snake Oil Sean says, Mr. Welch, aside from D&D, what are your favorite or inspirational, I'm guessing it's meant to be inspirational systems or settings?
Okay, let me see.
Thank you for the super chat, by the way, Sean.
The games that I've had the most fun with is 7th Sea, because I like me some swashbuckly stuff. I love Rogue Trader from Fantasy Flight Games. Not usually a big, well, I was a huge 40K player in the time, but Rogue Trader I think gave you the most options. The Street Fighter by White Wolf. We had glorious fun with that when we realized that if you don't take the game seriously, it's one of the funniest games you'll ever play. If anybody's ever had to suplex a bull, yeah, that's the game you do it at. Of course, I love me some Paranoia, but I also love Teenagers from Outer Space, Art Talsorian, Cyberpunk 2020. I've played me some Call of Cthulhu, though. I don't have a good record with Call of Cthulhu because every time we get started, the DM usually gets a different work schedule. And of course, I'm looking at the games that I have complete sets of. Star Wars D6, always great. Like leaning out the window with the blaster because you're going to shoot down the TIE fighter because your spaceship gun's gone. My wife says Bullwinkle and Rocky because of the hand puppets, but we only did like 2 or 3 times because then people started looking at us. Oh no, Mr. Peabody. And like I said, I've had glorious fun when we were playing G.I. Joe because the guys playing the G.I. Joe was like, well, how did somebody put it? It's not a war crime the first time. It's like, so what's your G.I. Joe character? And it's like, I'm Pig Sticker. I'm the bayonet specialist. Like, here's my loadout: 1 assault rifle, 1 standard bayonet, 1 serrated, 1 reverse serrated, 1 with thermal imaging, like 1 with, oh my God, it's like, I got this one right here, and it's like, it's one of those old British triangular ones. They'll bleed out in a minute. It's completely legal according to, that's not how G.I. Joe works. What, everybody else gets a specialty? I mean, Jesus Christ, they've got an administrative admin specialist. I'm not making that guy up. They actually have a guy whose specialty is paperwork in canon.
Yeah, that is one of the weird. I mean, G.I. Joe almost has to be played as a comedy game, right?
Yeah, it's like, what's the you get? I'm the World War I specialist. Like, wait, what? Like using a flamethrower on, like the Cobra band on stage. And of course, somebody did Memphis Belle, the USO officer, which was a stripper. It's like, and then we were like comparing notes with another G.I. Joe group, and they also had the exact same character. Where it's like, oh, okay, like, well, we're all military types, and we all know one guy that married the stripper. And so it was like horrible, so things that soldiers want to do, but of course they couldn't do it. But now in a game, it's more they're more than happy to.
So I've got a comment here from Flammable Ghost. He says, it's for the best that Wizards of the Coast has forgotten Miss Star. I'm still mad about what they did to Ravenloft. Yeah, I mean, I've seen time and again over the last several years, people who are, like fans of Dragonlance, fans of Ravenloft, fans of, which was it? The space one, Spelljammer, who were like all excited. Oh, we're finally getting a new book. And I'm like, no, dude, you don't want that. You don't want that because it's like, the Joker sequel has come out now, and that sequel exists only because the people that made Joker got angry that fans liked it for the wrong reasons, according to them. Yeah. And the sequel is meant to punish those people. It's meant to say, we're going to ruin this for you because you liked the wrong things. And that's basically what Wizards of the Coast has done to every single classic setting that they've published in the last 5 years.
Ravenloft comes across as it was written by committee.
Well, it was, and it was a DEI committee, right? So that's that was the job, and it was absolutely terrible. Like it's in the new Ravenloft, having dark powers isn't a bad thing. It's just powers, right? There's no real good or evil in it.
I've got a copy of what was it? Domains of Dread from 3rd edition, which was one of the best books for D&D. It was like, this is terror, this is Hammer horror, this is all of this.
Yeah, exactly. Ravenloft is meant to be Hammer horror, and 5th edition Ravenloft is Scooby-Doo.
It's Goosebumps.
It's Scooby-Doo 2024 or 2023 or whatever with a diversity cast.
Yeah.
So it's terrible, and I agree. It's the best thing in the world that Wizards has never touched Mystara.
Yeah. Spelljammer came across as, it's like, okay, let's make Spelljammer. Okay, let's devote no time to making Spelljammer whatsoever. Okay.
Well, they completely missed. I don't know if on purpose or just out of complete ignorance, because none of these people that work for Wizards nowadays actually know anything about RPGs. They missed everything that's I was never a huge fan of Spelljammer. I prefer Princess Ark, right? But the people that like Spelljammer like it for certain reasons, and none of those things that they like showed up in the Spelljammer campaign setting in the new one, right?
I've talked to was it Jeff Grubb wrote it? That's the Giga Twin. That's actually a quote from it's a paraphrase of our Orc freebooter from our Rogue Trader campaign.
Well, thank you very much for the super chat, Giga Twin.
Yeah, it's like people like these for a reason. If you take out the reason why people liked it, like they're not going to get the same. The new kids are not going to get the same wow factor. Spelljammer was terrible when it came out, but people liked the concept. The rules didn't support it, and like the guy that wrote Spelljammer will be the first one to tell you that the rules didn't support it.
Yeah.
I mean, Eberron snuck by 5th edition no problems because Keith Baker, is like he's like Margaret Weiss, where he keeps close control over what's written. The Dragonlance, that's barely cliff. They came out with the Dragonlance book, but it's barely cliff notes. They don't even tell you. There's like 8 pages of actual Dragonlance. It actually defies like the original setting.
It's set at the beginning of the War of the Lance, and you've got like
clerics.
You got clerics. You've got Knights of Solamnia that are not from Solamnia. Very obviously. You have women Knights of Solamnia, and all of the irony there is that in the actual novels or whatever, you have these are things that are addressed over the course of the story, right? Because it starts with these guys were too rigid, and then by the end of it, they make reforms, right? And that's what changes. So it's like it represents a kind of a social change that happens in the setting, and instead these guys said no, that would be they can't say no. They can't say no. Sexist or racist or whatever. So no, we have to start with everything being 2024 culture and everybody's included.
And that bled over into the Vecna book, where the Dragonlance setting included werewolves, which is one of the 3 races not included in Dragonlance.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any dragons in the Dragonlance book or the Dragonlance section.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what was I going to say? Oh yeah. Okay. So I'm changing pipes here, and while I'm doing that, I want to comment to everybody watching. First of all, we got about 69 viewers now. That's very nice. I asked Mr. Welch if he had anything to promote, but he apparently doesn't. So except I posted his YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked out Mr. Welch's YouTube channel, you really should go there and subscribe. As for myself, you'll see the links to all of my products in the description of this live stream. And if you're new here, if you're here because Mr. Welch brought you here or something, you should be sure to check them out. Baptism of Fire is my newest big book that came out this year and was #1 on the OSR bestseller list and drive-through for like 8.5 weeks. It's like all OSR products are variants of D&D in a certain way, and this is one that is based on what I call medieval authentic gaming, where you have the D&D rules heavily modified to fit the kind of historical legends and myths, so that it's set in the real world. It's set in Poland in the 10th and 11th centuries, and the monsters, the magic, everything in it is based on what people at that time would have imagined how magic and monsters and all that was, how it worked. So check that out. Check out all my other products. If you're a fan of Gonzo style fantasy in the similar vein of the weirder parts of Mystara, check out World of the Last Sun and the Gonzo Fantasy Companion. And if you're looking for interesting short products for OSR gaming, which is compatible with all D&D gaming, right? Take a look at my Pundit Files series, which is a periodical that I've been putting out on the Red Room store. I don't know if you're familiar with the Red Room, Mr. Welch, but they are they're publishers of very prolific publishers of OSR products in a particular style. They're Portuguese, which is another reason to support them, because they're basically from a third world country, and they need your help. Their settings, their worlds, and their games are all they have a wide variety of settings and genres, but they're all done in a style that I've kind of termed spaghetti punk, right? They're this very Euro style of like a spaghetti Western style variation of all kinds of stuff, from sci-fi to to Westerns, to horror, to historical settings. And they've published an incredible series of books, and they were canceled, so they ended up making their own store where they also have other people's products. And I decided to do the Pundit Files there instead of drive-through to support them. I don't have any, I don't make money from their stuff or anything like that, right? They host my product on their website, and the Wretched series, all of their OSR games are really well done and well worth checking out. So if you look on the link for the Pundit Files in my description there, you will find the link to it's a link to the Red Room store. Check out the Pundit Files series. It's there's 21 issues so far, and the latest issue that I've done is called the Medieval Calendar Year, which shows you basically how in a medieval world, in a pre-industrial, Western world, how people lived over the course of the year. It has all of the weird festivals, and the way, some of them might be familiar to people today, but they were done very different, right? Like Easter and Christmas were not, in the Middle Ages, were nothing like what we do. But then there's also all these other, days of importance, feast days and festivals, and election days for the city governments and things like that, and lots of adventure views. If that's not what you're into, then you can check out any one of the other 20 that I've done. There's adventures, supplements, and all things like that. And every single issue of the Pundit Files costs $3.50. So if you can find someone to give you $3.50, you can get an issue of the Pundit Files. All right. Now that I've finished that, and I'm going to grab another pipe here. There we go. All right. So we've got another super chat here. Mog of War says Archfey HOA is definitely something to add. Somebody was suggesting I need to add that to World of the Last Sun. So I don't know, maybe. Quantifel says Vaults of Pandius. You will all love it if you're interested in Mystara. Yeah, Vaults of Pandius is amazing. All of the incredible amount just of map work that Mystara fans have done, you know, because Mystara is a gigantic setting, right? It's enormous. It's got an entire, like, you know, and even now there are untold numbers of continents in theory that people could fill with their own stuff, right? But there's the number of places that are already accounted for in Mystara is incredible, because there's tons of areas of the known world, and then there's the, you know, the countries off to the side of the known world that gradually got covered in other stuff, Princess Arc stuff mostly, and then there's the Hollow World and everything in there, you know. So there's tons of locations, and one of the things I loved about Mystara is the style of the hex maps that came, like that really started, I think, with the Gazetteer series, but then they ran with it, and they're just amazing, you know.
Thorfinn is like the cartographer, and he gave me all of his map. He sent me all of his maps for the handbook. He says, here's the thing, is that you can't adjust the scale at all. You have to put it as is. And it's like, okay, he's like, you can't skew it at all, because if you skew art, the elf ears look slightly off. If you skew a map, you know, Cleveland's now in Illinois.
Yeah, that's true. So, you know, in my own stuff, in like Sword and Caravan, which is my setting book for running adventures in the Crusades and the Silk Road, I'm not a publisher, right? I only write. I have other people that publish for me, right? So this is published by Mad Scribe Games, but I made a very strong point of telling Mad Scribe that the maps needed to be, you know, in the style of the kind of Mystara. Oh, there we go. The Mystara element to it, you know. So you got a map of like everything from the Levant up to China in the book, in the Gazetteer section of the book. That is, you know, that's a direct homage to the maps of Mystara. Let's see what else. The Red Room does a good job. I didn't know they were Portuguese. Yeah, well, yeah, they've mentioned it many times, but I wouldn't have mentioned it if I was. But there we are. Judd Goswick asks, am I going to review Uncharted Seas by the Red Room? I think I'll like it. I haven't received that book yet, but the thing is, they sent me a whole bunch of books last year, and I've still got, I think, 2 left to review. I've been a little bit lax. So, you know, the first half of the year, Baptism of Fire took up a lot of my time. So that's something I'm sure that once I'm done the last couple of books of that to review, they'll probably send me some of their newer stuff, because I know that there's a lot of stuff that they've done since then. Because you know, I think I publish a lot, but you know, I've got like literally hundreds of products, but I've done that over many years, and they've been around for what, 2.5 years, 3 now, and they've done so many full-size books that it's unbelievable how they get that through. All right, so next question. Well, this kind of covers something that we were already talking about a little bit. How horrified would you be if tomorrow Wizards of the Coast announced that they were doing a Mystara setting book?
I'd send them my rate sheet. You want it done right, or do you want it done?
Yeah, the problem is they're not going to listen to you, right? Like, look at the Dragonlance book. Notably, they not only didn't consult with either Weiss or Hickman, they didn't even tell them they were doing it. You know, like it's just abominable. But because they don't want it to be classic, right?
No,
whatever they do, it's going to be disastrous. You know.
Well, it's like one of those zombie TV shows where the original cast and the original crew has long since left, and the show is still going on for 20 years. So everybody that was attached to it, everything that made it special, is, you know, it's completely changed over. You know, like of all the remakes, Dragonlance was probably the least offensive, because that wasn't a source book. That wasn't a Dragonlance source book. That was just an adventure they slapped Dragonlance on.
Yeah.
It's like my wife, when we were talking about Ravenloft, says Wizards of the Coast is really afraid of presenting people doing horrible things to other people, which was one of the problems with Ravenloft. Was they stripped out a lot of the horror that way. Spelljammer, I just think they just slapped it together with a weekend. Says, okay, we got to get this done, and quick, what do we do? And we need more pages. Well, let's make the pages super thick and add floor plans for a good third of it. It's like these, they're making stuff quickly and cheaply, and it's like it's good, fast, and cheap. Pick two.
The other thing that they obviously despise is traditional heroic fantasy and traditional morality, right? And the problem with both Dragonlance and Ravenloft is that those are highly moralistic settings, right? Ravenloft, hammer horror, good versus evil, right? And so they made a setting where those things are completely blurred and it doesn't really matter. You know, like it's just Scooby-Doo, right? And Dragonlance is literally like a Mormon fantasy story, you know, like it's got very defined morality. And again, they didn't want to do that. They wanted to say, oh no, there are good draconians and goblins and things like that, right? And you know, it's just oppression if you're suggesting that all draconians are evil, you know, like.
It's like, and they don't hire. Well, you know this more than anybody, but you know, like, you know, you look at the people that are the people that make really good stuff over on the DM's Guild. Those are that should be like the current day dungeon magazine. It's like, hey, I've got an adventure. This is my idea. Great, give it to us in dungeon, and if it's good, we'll give you a module. So
if I was made president of WotC, which is never going to happen, obviously, but if I did, you know, the first thing I would do is I'd fire all the writers, and then I would like hire all the people that made the best-selling Dungeon Masters Guild stuff, right? Because those are the people that know what people want, right? And
where's MT Black?
That they're hiring are not being hired because they know what people want. They're being hired for political reasons. You know?
Yeah, and now it's all computers. They want to turn it into.
They're going. You know, they spent the last year and a half saying that they're going to oppose AI, and now they suddenly said, yeah, we're going all in on AI, you know, which is not surprising. Snake Oil Sean, $2 super chat. Thank you very much. Dragonlance 5e was an utter abomination. Yes. Dark Sun, very problematic for WotC. Well, they already said they're never going to do Dark Sun because, you know, slavery or something like that. It was just
they'll never do Dark Sun because they can't write as good as the Dark Sun people. Plus, who are you going to get to replace Brahm?
Yeah.
You know, they got.
No, imagine how abominable their art would be for. Oh my God, it would be horrible. But their art for Dark Sun would just be like abject nonsense. So, you know, we're touching on elements of cultural conflict in the hobby. You know, I don't really know very much about your politics or something like that, but you know, I didn't peg you for most of the time that you've been around as being someone who was you know, particularly big on political or cultural issues in the hobby.
I tend to, you know, like when something riles me up, I'll mention it. But yeah, I tend to keep my politics out of it because when you put your politics into it, you lose half your audience.
But I think I've noticed in the last little while that you've had a little bit of a turning point in that I think that you've become a bit more vocal in your criticisms of some of what's going on.
I don't like products.
Yeah, you feel like crap.
Exactly. You know, Spelljammer, those books, they made those books out of Spelljammer, just from a technical point of view, they made the books hardcover, used a much thicker, almost cardstock page to present this book as larger than it is, when it was the same size as the Karamikos book. All right, they use larger fonts, they use more art, they use all these tricks to give you bigger books with less content. And I've seen this before. Somebody mentioned the Etruscan book previously, where the guy had 30 days to get it from writing the book to publication. He had 30 days for a 96-page book. So he used a size 14 font. He had a full quarter of the book was art, and he had 1-inch margins all the way around. It's like, yeah, I've done editing work before. I can tell it when you're padding. So they're throwing this stuff out here, and they're padding, or they're just like throwing out ideas, but they don't want to go into the ideas. Yeah, they don't look at any of the research. They don't see like why people like this in the first place.
Yeah,
there's a reason why
they're capable of understanding that. Right? Like you have to understand that anybody who had any real ability in design is no longer working at Wizards of the Coast. But beyond that, the people that they have now, a large number of them were not just diversity hires, though they were that, but they were also nepotism hires of people like Ajit George, when he was brought in to do what is it called, Radiant Citadel.
He was originally
he hired a bunch of people that were basically just friends of his to get them, to give them money, and they were, a lot of them were people who had never played D&D. Right, they were people whose writing background was either feminist blogging or writing vegan cookbooks.
Yeah, I read some
young adult novelists. And all of them obviously from that like extreme progressive wing of the left, and they had no idea what they were doing. And none of these people do. So it's this is the problem.
Extremely progressive and find bad writing offensive anyway.
Yeah, my wife's left wing, and she hates bad writing. And we both agree on this one thing: quality sells.
Yeah.
And if you're not putting out a quality product, nobody's going to want it.
Yeah, but quality is definitely a big point, and a lot of the people who have gotten in there and in other places in geek culture too are not there because they're good writers. They're there for other reasons.
Yeah, I know.
And
I've worked at magazines where you were there because you knew somebody, or somebody wanted to give you your shot, and then
they needed the right kind of representation, right?
Then you end up with somebody where you give them a hard word count and they exceed it by 50%. And I'm sitting there like,
besides that, in
8 pages.
Yeah, but besides that, in many cases, these are people who their education, let's say, or their conditioning is that their goal is meant to be subversive of whatever they're set to be doing, right? So they're intentionally creating products that they know are not going to appeal to the people that liked that genre or that story or that setting or whatever. Yeah. Because they're going to intentionally deconstruct it, and this is the idiocy of our postmodern world, right? That their notion is, well, this thing that people love for this reason, we think it's a bad reason, so we're going to actually make it as opposite as we can get away with, as an intentional challenge to the people who love this thing, and then it always fails, right? There's I got Sadwing's Raging's quote here, the wider audience will be here shortly, right? Like that's the way that they convinced the corporate world of this, is that they said, no, you see, the problem is you've got all these gamers who are fans of your product, but we think they're toxic. And if you let us make these new products that are aimed at these demographics that do not play your games, they're going to suddenly show up and start playing your games, and you're going to have millions more gamers, playing it. But that's never true, because that doesn't work. That's not what, like that isn't how any of this stuff works, right? Like I live in Latin America. There's a very big, proportionally speaking, for a little country where I live, there's a very big audience of tabletop gamers here, and they're Latin American, right? And the games they love are Dungeons and Dragons, Vampire, Call of Cthulhu, Star Wars, and they love it exactly for the same reason that gamers in Tulsa would love this. Like the whole point is that is what people are interested in, right? The people that are going to play RPGs are going to be interested in those aspects, those themes, and you're never going to get someone who like sees someone that looks like them on an illustration and goes, oh well, now I have to play, right? Like the player's handbook, the new player's handbook that they just came out probably has more women of color in its art than there are actual women of color playing D&D. So it's insane, because they still think that that's going to matter, and it's not, and even they know it's not subconsciously. They know, at some level, they know that they're not doing this because it's going to bring, middle-aged women of color into playing D&D. They're doing it because it's going to appeal to certain, middle-class white women that are going to applaud it on Twitter or on, well, maybe not Twitter, maybe on Instagram or something. But they're not actually going to buy the books. Like it's just nuts.
I keep teasing Wizards of the Coast on the art because the 5th edition has accidentally become the Mystara edition because they keep having parallels to Mystara, but they don't recognize it as such. When they did the Spanish orcs, somebody was look at it, and everyone's like, the guy's catching just holy hell, for the Spanish orcs. Not the
Spanish orcs, explicitly Mexican orcs.
Yeah,
right?
the Mexican orcs.
That is the political message, right?
Yeah.
That is
so I put out there is like, so hey,
wonderful people that are just looking to migrate, and they're a family people, and they're definitely not evil.
And this guy's catching flack just from everywhere. And I put it like, so these are like the Krugel orcs from the Mystara Hollow Worlds. Like, yes, that's exactly what they are. They're the Krugel orcs from the sea. We were going back into that. You have, unless there, this guy has no idea who the Krugel orcs were.
But ironically, the Krugel orcs were, more interesting. Like it was what 30 years ago, and they're better than these guys.
And then they've got the LJ and toy line characters on the front cover. It's like, hey, those are from Mystara. They posted up the where they're
but they probably don't even know it's from Mystara. To them, it's just member berries, right? They're like, oh, this will trick old school fans into buying this, and then we'll hit them with everything they hate. $2 super chat from Snake Oil Sean, thank you, and thanks to Calvinoni for his moderation. Giga Twin, $10 Canadian. That's about $1.50 American now, isn't it? One of the things I love about RPG books is the art inside. But modern Wizards art has just been uninspired as opposed to 3rd edition, let alone Fantasy Flight, which are just gorgeous to see. Well, there's tons of great art in many RPG books. I'll point out my own Baptism of Fire as one example, but Wizards art is terrible for so many reasons, right? And I was talking about the diversity element, but that's just one of them, right? There's like the number of go through the new PHP and look at the number of art pieces there that when you think about it and you look at like stock art, like Getty stock art of people in a boardroom or something, and you realize that it's just that somebody took that and then traced over it to add fantasy elements. It's just ridiculous.
The artist I use for my book, Rubus, Greek artist, fantastic. I'd put him up against just about anybody. And one of the pieces we had for the player's guide was we had a halfling sitting on the bloody stump of a bale where a baler's head should be, and all around him was dead demons, or all around the halfling. Sorry, it was a her. Canon characters, quick magic, copper toes. And it's like there's dead demons everywhere. One's impaled on a stalactite. You've got the Hezru impaled with a spear that's also going into the succubus. And the succubus happens to be topless because she's a chaotic evil sex demon. And somebody was going, you can't show art like this. It's like, yes, I can. I'm European. And it's like it's the violence against the succubus. It's like you have a problem with her stabbing the succubus. Well, the succubus being topless and not the 3 impalements in the beheading. Well, okay, that's something. But I mean, it's like, but he has been inspired by some of the art because they have like this foodsies is yumsies obsession with a lot of the stuff. It was like, oh, people sitting around a table talking. So I don't know. Okay, so you're familiar with Baron von Hendricks,
Yes.
the bad guy? Okay, so one of the things, the retcons that the players did was give him a family, which made him a lot more approachable and gave him a lot more reasons for being evil. So Rubus was like looking at the this like Cass and Vecna going, "Oh my God, did you hear? We're having a book," and he's like, okay, so he took the von Hendricks family. And it's just like them around the table going, "Oh my God, did you hear? Oh my God." And at the end of the table, there's a guy they've just poisoned to death. And it's just like, okay, just by adding the dead guy, there's so much more into this story where they're like, the family that slays together stays together. And they're having a nice family dinner after they've just murdered a man in front of them. And like one kid is completely oblivious to the fact that he's sitting next to a dead guy because he wants the cookies in the middle of the table. It's like, you want the art to tell a story. You want it to, you want it to be an image that's like that you can see where it's going. Not dwarves baking cookies in the middle of a forge.
Well, but that's the thing, right? Like, we know that millennial, now all basically middle-aged women, they're obsessed with food, and so they put that into everything, into the TV shows, art, everything. Wayne Brack has a $10 super chat. Thank you very much. Appreciate the historical gems. Yeah, we're getting some really good material here tonight. Driving and Dragons is here. Hey.
So
where were we?
We had.
Essentially, it's a good thing that Mystara is probably never going to be something Wizards bothers with.
I think Hasbro will eventually sell the license. They won't sell the IP, but Hasbro Hasbro is the king of licensing. If somebody wants to buy the license,
here's the thing. Right now, they're trying to make the BTT happen. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to happen. They've tried it like 3 times before in the history of Wizards, and every time it was a disaster. And it's obvious that they're having problems with the BTT because it was supposed to be out already, and it's not. But if it comes out, then they need it to be a really big hit, right? Like that. Yeah. Cynthia Williams gave away the game. She said that Dungeons and Dragons has to become $1 billion product for them, and it's not anywhere close to that right now. And their gamble on this is that they're essentially going to be killing the book version of D&D, and you see this, like, for example, that actually they've in terms of book sales of D&D, like of the new player's handbook, they're really tiny, right? But they don't care about that, because what they want to do is make everyone get into the BTT and get locked into that, into the subscription, into all the extra stuff you'd have to pay for, and that's where the money will be, according to them. Yeah. But if that fails, then I think you're right. They're not going to want to keep doing Wizards, and they'll probably license it to someone. But there's no guarantee that who they license it to is going to do a better job. Though it'll be hard to imagine them doing a much worse job.
Well, just from my experiences with Hasbro, as years and years ago, I ran a chain of bookstores before Amazon happened. Hasbro will sell the individual licenses. That's what they do. How many versions of Clue do we have? How many versions of Risk do we have? How many versions of Monopoly? We've already got Stranger Things, Rick and Morty. What's the third one? Hasbro will license. Hasbro, if somebody's going to offer them free money for something that they've got sitting around, Hasbro will take that money. They always have. It's like, hey, what's this Dark Sun? That's a D&D setting. We don't like it. And it's like, well, is there somebody willing to give me money so that they'll make it? You don't have to make it. We'll have somebody else make it. Just give me money. Mystara, give me some money. Give me some money. Birthright, give me money. That's how Hasbro works. That's how they've always worked. It's like they do it with their board games, and I don't see them not doing it with their RPGs.
No, for sure. But that's not gonna happen until the BTT flops. if it does, I mean, it might not flop. You never know, but I suspect it will.
Or until some bean counter at Hasbro looks around and goes, "Hey, we've got all these IPs that aren't making us money. What's up?" I think Hasbro. I think the decision will come from Hasbro, and it will not be attached to Wizards of the Coast. It'll just be going, hey, we've got product that's not making us money. Why not? Why aren't you doing anything with this? Quick, license it out. They licensed out Ravenloft for 3rd edition.
They did. Yeah.
I think that's the only one they've ever licensed out, and they did actually a decent job.
Trying to think if there's any others, but no, you might be right about that.
So
no, if anyone in the audience can think of something else they licensed out that Wizards licensed out.
Yeah, but Wizards, Hasbro will go over Wizards if they see that they've got stuff they're not monetizing.
Yeah, but right now they're not doing it, as Judd Goswick reminds us again. I mentioned this earlier in the live stream, but Bruce Hurd tried to license Princess Ark, which he wrote, and they rejected him. So then he had to make his Kaladar instead.
He didn't say exactly what they said, but apparently it wasn't very polite.
Rafael Andrade says Dragonlance was also licensed out in.
Yeah, they didn't do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, they will license out stuff if they, as long as they, don't make fun of Hasbro. Because when I was making the original Player's Handbook, they told me it's like, okay, no, you can't publish it, but you fan creation license, but you can't do crowdfunding. So I had to pay for all the art myself. But when I ran 5th edition, most of the Mystara players that I had when I was running my book were all like young, because they'd never heard of Mystara. For these guys, it was brand new. This was a new setting. This was something original. Yeah. It was like, oh my God, I can play a French wizard? Oh, I'm going to cast the spells. It was like, so that's how you market it. Is like, hey guys, this hasn't seen an official, release in 30 years. So that means nobody under the drinking age has ever seen a new book of this. So let's market this to them. It's like, hey guys, this is something new. Yeah. But because if Hasbro doesn't think that, and this goes before the D&D got huge from COVID, if Hasbro doesn't think that you're utilizing all the things that you can be making money of them, they will force your hand. They did that. Like I said, that seems likely eventually. I mean, and eventually they, I think that if the BTT fails badly enough, they're just going to stop doing it themselves. They're just going to license everything out. Because that's exactly what they did with Avalon Hill. When they bought Avalon Hill and saw, there's like, oh my God, we've got 5,000 board games we suddenly own. Like, what are we going to do with all of this? Quick, license out everything. Snake Oil Sean, $5 super chat. Thank you so much. The reason D&D Online will fail is the same reason it always does. Tabletop RPG and video games have similar but not perfectly aligned audiences. Yeah, well, in a way, I don't know. I'm not a video gamer guy, right? But Baldur's Gate 3 came out last year. It was the only reason, by the way, that Wizards didn't actually show loss this year, right? This last year. Because that's where all the profit really was, because their books were selling like crap. In many ways, that, from what I understand, I've never played Baldur's Gate 3, but you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it does a lot of stuff that lets you do some of the things that you would do in a virtual tabletop, but it's probably going to do it better than the virtual tabletop would in some respects, maybe not in others. But the point is, there are a lot of virtual tabletops out there, and it seems to me that it's going to be a little bit challenging for them to be able to make a better, a better virtual tabletop environment than other options. Either video games for the people that are into the video game side of things, or RPG tabletop, virtual tabletops, of which there are already a few, Yeah. But I mean, okay, let's be honest. Dungeons and Dragons has not really had great management over its history. I think that's in fact,
that is one of the defining traits of Dungeons and Dragons, right? Right from the early Gygax years to the Lorraine Williams years to the, I guess probably like their peak good management was sort of at the beginning of Wizards of the Coast, right? With
Yeah, third edition.
Ryan
Monty
Mancy,
Cook. That era. That was when at my bookstore we had the player's handbook on our shelf that we never carried RPG books before because it was on the New York Times bestseller list. Okay. They knew how to market it. They marketed it very well. They did. It was spectacular. It was also at the height of Pokemon. So when Pokemon was just getting started, but I mean, Lorraine Williams drove that company to the ground. The Bloom brothers drove that company to the ground. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to, like market it. You got, in the 90s, Baldur's Gate took off with the original computer games, and that kind of saved it. The computer games have saved D&D's ass more than once. But they're trying to capture the height of 2020 when 2020 was unique and an aberration, and they're never going to have that audience again. Yeah. People want to sit around a table with friends. We want to throw down.
I don't know. that the WHO might have something to say about that. They could come up with something new. Yeah. But interesting point here from Gigatwin. Most popular character made in Baldur's Gate 3 character creator is the human male fighter, which made some people very confused. Well, I don't know if you know this, but they've done studies in D&D, and the most popular D&D character is a human male cleric, right? Which also drives these people crazy, right? Because they want a hobby where the most popular character will be, I don't know, a pansexual tiefling bard, and that is not what they're getting.
I think the funniest thing somebody ever said about Baldur's Gate 3 I wasn't a fan of Baldur's Gate 3. I don't like turn-based RPGs. It was like the NPCs were kind of put me off, and he goes, somebody told me, it's like, the problem with all the NPCs in Baldur's Gate 3 is the one term that can describe all of them is flight risk. Like, there's no, you play Baldur's Gate 1, the first character you meet is, this quirky, perky human thief that follows you everywhere and doesn't have any hang-ups. It doesn't have anything attached to her body that's going to explode shortly. And everybody's side quest is not, earth-shaking. That was a problem with Forgotten Realms was, okay, one of the many problems with Forgotten Realms is that everything seems to be world-ending.
That's true.
No matter what the adventure is, this could be the end of the world. Which was a running joke when I did a series of articles, which was like it started off as the Ravenloft Travel or the Immigration Agency, where everybody from Forgotten Realms was trying to immigrate to anywhere but the Forgotten Realms because their world was going to always constantly blow up if some adventurer didn't stop it. It's like, hi, we understand you have some room here in Barovia. For what? It's like, we'd like to move here. You want to move to Barovia? Yes. Why?
At least it's stable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, well, have you had dragons try to destroy your world recently? No. What about a lich? No. Beholders? No. Mind flayers? No, yeah. not that we think of. What about giants? Have you had giants try to? No, we just have a vampire. A vampire. One vampire. Yeah, we'd like to move here.
Yeah, it's especially funny because in the early version, like the Ed Greenwood version of the Forgotten Realms, and to a large extent the first edition box set of the Forgotten Realms, the Forgotten Realms was a sword and sorcery setting. It was a setting that was not explicitly not about disaster or doomsday of the week, as Steamboat puts it here. Yeah. It was meant to be. Your characters would probably be sellswords wandering around looking for their fortune in a lot of kind of slightly grubby places, and that was one of the things that I really liked. Like, I love the first edition box set of Forgotten Realms, right? And everything after that is just made it dumber,
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so I am pretty if the audience has any other questions they would like to ask Mr. Welch or myself or both of us, this would be the moment to do it. We'll give these guys a second to think things through here.
Yeah.
But I think we've covered a lot of stuff, and
Yeah.
I very much appreciate your time in having come on here.
No, anytime.
Again, everybody who hasn't already, check out Mr. Welch's YouTube channel. And
I think I'm like 6,000. I think I'm like 6 people away from 12,000 subscribers.
yeah, well, that's bigger than me. So there you go.
What can I say? It's talent.
Yeah.
I tell everybody.
How long have you had the channel?
Welcome to Mystara. I've had the channel for 10 years. I have had
okay.
Welcome to Mystara for maybe 4.
Okay.
Because nobody liked my original stuff, which was bad.
Great guest tonight. All right, here's a question. Which Mystaran villain would make the best Ravenloft Dark Lord?
Xandor, Crown Prince of Alphacia. Mystara's version of
yeah, basically, you know,
Gapdog.
that guy, if there was a second edition setting, he would have just immediately become a Dark Lord in the next Ravenloft book. You're right.
It has 2 Dark Lords. It has a Wereshark, which is, they added it, retconned it canonically afterwards. And they had Meridoth, which they specifically made him Alphasian and put him into there. But if you're going to yank somebody anywhere to be the Crown Prince Manchild.
Yeah, really. I mean, they put Lord Soth in there, so like, why not put you know, somebody who's actually notable in Mystara there?
Yeah, but Margaret Weiss was pretty much about to take a crowbar to them until they gave Lord Soth back because she had plans for him, and they said, "Oh, now he's in Ravenloft."
Yeah.
Excuse me?
Maybe that's why, I guess.
Yeah. And then, well, Larry Elmore tells the story. We don't know how allegorical it is, but when he did the original art with the some of the original art, and he didn't put pants on Gold Moon, and she was like wearing a leotard with like a straight, and he said, yeah, I walked into my office the next door, and there was an axe in my door that said pants. And we're not sure if he was joking or if she actually, because I've talked to Margaret before, and that's not out of her, that's not out of what she would do.
Snake Oil Sean, $2 super chat. Redguard did nothing wrong.
Except die a lot.
Richard Kuntz is saying that the channel is 404. Richard, do you mean the link I put to Mr. Welch? Let me take a look here. Maybe I don't know. I just clicked it, and I think I know what happened there. So
YouTube get mad at my latest horror video.
Mr. Welch's YouTube. Oh yeah, okay. It is having a little bit of a problem. I'll correct that when we're done the live stream, because it actually created a link to your username instead of I put the full link to the page. But I'll fix that as soon as we're done. Thank you for letting me know about that, Richard. Let me see here. I enjoy watching Mr. Welch's videos. Michael McLaughlin says, "What about that lich from Clantire?"
Brennan McGregor. Yeah,
Scottish lich. That's a bold move.
He's a radiation lich. He is absolutely miserable, but he's no worse than some of the other Glantrian princes.
Yeah, generic avatar. There you go. Thank you for putting the link there. All right. Well, we've had 2 hours now, so I think this is probably a good place to stop. Thank you again for having been the very first guest of the RPG Pundit encounter, and for everybody else,
first time.
Yeah. For everybody else, just to let you know, I'm looking at my schedule here. Typically, the next show would be on the 3rd of November. However, I think I might have a conflict there, so it might be pushed over to the 17th of November. But I will let you all know when we do episode 2. I'll be doing, as a rule, it'll be once every 4 weeks, but this time it might be 6 weeks until the next one, or maybe 2 weeks. Who knows? Maybe if I've got too many people wanting to be on it, I'll do one in 2 weeks from now. So I appreciate everybody who came on here on the audience, and once again, thank you very much, Mr. Welch. Be sure to check out his channel. Check out all of my products in the description. If you're not familiar with the OSR, you're in for a treat. And especially check out the Red Room. And if you're looking for stuff to review, Mr. Welch, you should get in touch with the guys in the Red Room. And
I've got
I'm
a pile of
RPGs.
I've got a pile of RPGs 30 deep right now for review. Somebody just sent me 2 more, including the DC Heroes.
Oh, is that a new one?
No, it's a very old one.
So you review like ancient games. Okay.
Oh, new. I mean, I've reviewed. What was the oldest one I reviewed? I mean, there's like the. Let me see. From the 70s, I got Powers and Perils, the old Avalon Hill.
Oh yeah.
But I just reviewed one that hasn't even come out yet today. So I reviewed.
Jed Goswick says justice for Macris. Alex Macris is meant to be my first guest. He'll be back. I'll check. Actually, that's what I'm going to do, Jed. I'm going to check to see if he's available 2 weeks from now, and if he is, I'll do episode 2 in 2 weeks. And if not, we'll see if I can make him. He's definitely going to be my guest very soon. Like Alex. I used to work for Alex Macris when he was the boss at Defy Media. He was also the editor-in-chief of The Escapist, but I wasn't on The Escapist. I was on a couple of the other Defy Media sites writing for him. So we've got a good relationship, and I'm sure we're going to have him soon. And now that I've figured out how to do StreamYard, we won't have the technical problems.
We'll get new technical.
All right. So thanks again, Mr. Welch, and I guess we're going to leave it here for tonight. Thank you to everybody who was watching. Currently smoking. This is a Nerup apple with Argento Latakia. All right. Take care, everybody.